This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac X. Your Mac as good as new. Find out more at macpaw.com/podcast. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, the COVID-19 situation rolls on, and that's exactly why Glenn Fleishman is here, because it's the only time I can corral him to get him on the show. Glenn, welcome back. It's good to see you.
Oh, you'll be able to get me, unfortunately, for a long, long time to come, I'm afraid. But no, it's very exciting. I haven't had a lot of new books in a while, and then suddenly I have been writing book after book after book. So I got a lot of new stuff to talk about, too.
Great. Well, then that means you just got to make a whole lot more visits back here on a regular basis.
Anytime as I am proving.
All right, great. Well, this time we're going to talk about your new Take Control book, and this is such a timely book, Take Control of Zoom. And of course, Zoom, we're talking about the online audio and video conference solution. This time, though, I think we're going to do things a little bit differently, because we're going to ask Glenn for a few tips on using Zoom to get you right out of the box, and then we'll dig into Zoom itself and what's in the book. Glenn, does that work for you?
That'd be great. And the reason I think it might be a good place to start is I find there are a lot of questions I get that are it's not all the same, but there's some basic stuff to get set up that it turns out if you know it, you come across as like a super professional suddenly, like, oh yeah, I'm a great Zoom user. I've been using it forever. It's like, all right, here you go. And then there's a few things that I thought were not basic, but I thought they were easy to find, and people tell me it's very hard to find they didn't know about them on their own in the app.
All right, well then I'll just let you roll.
All right, well, so here's the top tip, the one that every time I tell people they are amazed, and it's totally built into the app. It's something you can find if you work at it. It's if you're using a desktop app, it does not work with the mobile apps because there's no keyboard. You mute yourself, which is a good strategy. In any case, you should probably mute yourself in a meeting with more than two people all the time and only unmute yourself to speak. But that's a pain because you have to remember to click the icon or do a key combination. In the desktop apps, you hold down the space bar, and while you are depressing the space bar, your mic is turned on. And then when you release, you go back to mute. So it's a way, all you have to do is keep your finger handy or remember to press it, and then you can participate but not contribute to background noise or let background noises happening unexpectedly around you wind up in the call. That's my favorite one.
That is a good one. It's like I guess just using a regular broadcast microphone, not this kind of broadcast, but a radio microphone where you hit the key to talk and then let off to not talk.
Yeah, it's like a press to talk or kind of thing. Yeah, it's like a walkie-talkie system with your space bar, but it helps. I was just on a call earlier today. The Hamilton Type Museum is doing these regular. It's a great institution in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, on the shores of Lake Michigan. It's preserving type history in America, and they have a great community, and they have an annual event that attracts hundreds of people to come and talk about type and just meet up and so forth. And they're doing every week or so the Hamilton Hang, and they get people together on a Zoom call. And this time around, a lot of people left their mics on, and the moderator's like, "Oh, can you turn off?" And she's clicking people's mics off individually and so forth. And this is actually, maybe this is tip number 2 for hosts. I was actually going to not include this, is if you're hosting an event, that means you started the Zoom call, there's a mute all button you can tap or click in the participants list. So no matter what app you're using, if you're the host, you click or tap mute all, and everyone's mic is muted. And here's the thing, they can't unmute themselves without your permission. So you as the host then go and unmute people who need to talk. Then they can mute and unmute themselves, but it keeps the whole call quiet until you're ready to have people participate. And it's a great thing, especially for a presentation where you have people coming in via video or audio, and none of them are actually going to speak, or they might ask questions late in the event. So that's my host tip for muting.
I knew about that. I don't think, though, because I've used that, but I don't think I realized that I had control of them being able to unmute.
You can also stop people from sending video. So if someone is inappropriate or they walk off to the bathroom with their laptop, which has been known to happen, and forget they're being on camera, you could just you click and say stop video for that person in the participants list. And it's a great thing to know about.
Yeah, that is a great thing to know about. That is one of my favorite Zoom tips is, folks, just remember you're on camera.
I got a whole section of my book about that, actually. All right, so the next tip is This one is, I was baffled by this because one of my kids takes Aikido, and when the restrictions, the work at home and stay at home restrictions hit, the Aikido instructor, who is terrific, she was trying to figure out, well, what's the next step? And she doesn't want to shut down the dojo, and a lot of people are in this position. She said, let's try remote lessons and we'll use Zoom. And so in the first few, she was learning how to use the tool and where to set her camera up. And then she became more and more sophisticated. And she is now, she's not a Zoom guru, but she's got it all set up. It's great. And I noticed after like the first month, she would send out an invitation and it had an ICS file link to a Zoom site built into the invitation. And I could not figure out why that was because I couldn't make it work. And it turns out, so the ICS file is it's a standard calendar format that iCal, that's how old I am. Calendar uses that third-party calendars and any calendar software can import an event in ICS format. I think Google has its own calendar format, but it'll read ICS and whatever. So I am digging and digging while writing this book. I'm like, how do you get Zoom to generate you this link? So when you send the invitation, someone just clicks and it's added to the calendar. Here's my tip. It only comes up for recurring events, but you can create a recurring event that's a single event. So if you want Zoom to generate a calendar event that you can copy and paste as part of the invitation, all you do is make the event recurring and have it end before a second occurrence. So you set it to weekly and set the end date to after, tomorrow, after the event's today. And then it will create an invitation. You send that out and people can click and it will automatically download and let them import into their calendar program the event information, including all the links and the time and the meeting ID. And if you embed it, the password.
That's a great tip. And that's one I did not. That's a little hacking of Zoom that I did not know about.
It is, and it's so frustrating because you've probably gotten these invitations too, or someone's like, well, I can't figure out how to make a calendar event, or they create one separately and send it to you through, they're using Google Calendar to send you one, but then the invite's coming from Zoom. So it's frustrating. I expect they will change that, but it's funny that you have to do this hack.
Yeah, but that's a really good hack. That's a really good hack.
My next one is, goes for all video conferencing, is you need a little ring light. So it's a little light that people who are Instagram influencers and celebrities know about this, but it's just a small light. I got this tiny USB chargeable, self-powered or battery-powered one, and I stick it up, clips on top of a laptop or on my iMac, and it just gives a little light. I'll show you, like if I do it like this, you can see it's, you can see it in my glasses. Better if people don't wear glasses or anti-reflective coating, but it just gives you a little highlighting. So it's not like we should be lighting ourselves like professionals on a Zoom call, or this is a Skype call. I'll give the secret away that we're using Skype and for video quality this time around. And I think when you have a little more light on your face and you're well lit and you have a non-disruptive background, people will pay more attention to you. They won't notice the artifacting. You won't glitch or be in low light or pixelated, or they'll be like, is Glenn smiling or frowning right now? So anything you can do, it's a communication tool. So I bought this thing. I think it was under $20. You can get, if you're doing broadcasting now or doing presentations or classes over Zoom, you could certainly get a nicer one. There are ring lights that come on stands that have more controls. You could swap out. I could get glasses with a better anti-reflective coating on it so you don't see the light. But I was watching some Zoom performance recently. It was a bunch of actors, and I could see in all their glasses, I could see little ring lights as they performed. So they're all using it. They all know. Anyway, so you can look like a professional for a very small amount of money, and it will just, I'm not into the we should improve our appearances artificially unless we feel like it. I mean, I am into that rather, but I think this is a tiny, technical, it's a little hack. How do we at home participate better? It's make ourselves a little better seen. We will be better seen.
Yeah, and I think for those of us that are doing business Zoom calls, I think it makes you look a little more professional to look. I mean, look as good as you can look. We're not going to get into makeup or anything, but just a little bit of lighting makes a huge difference.
And I mean, Chuck, you're very well lit. I would say you have a great setup, and I know you work on this as a professional, but I think it's possible to achieve something within degrees of Chuck with a little bit of help. You can look almost as good as he can without spending the money on studio lighting and so forth.
Yeah, and as LED technologies has improved, the lights have gotten better and cheaper both. And so
Yeah.
it used to be you'd spend a mint of money for a couple studio lights or whatever. And now that ring light can accomplish a good 70, 80, 90% of it, depending on what your background is.
It's pretty nice, and I'll get into my background in a second, why it's all green. And okay, so my next tip, I'll still go through the tips here, is turn off notifications while using Zoom. And my wife pointed this out. She said, I was finishing the book, and she said, "Do you have a section on disabling notifications?" And I said, "Well, I got something in there for people hosting an event." She said, "I'm not like you. I'm on a laptop. I'm not using a big screen." And she pointed out, and I don't do this, she has uh, a lot of alerts that come up, a lot of notifications that she has to dismiss because she wants to make sure and see them. So she has them persist and has to click OK. I have very few like that. Most of mine are temporary. They show up and then they go away on their own, whether it's on an iPhone or on a Mac. Well, in the middle of a Zoom call, especially on a smaller laptop screen, you can wind up and be like, "I'm talking to you, Chuck," and then I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's very interesting." And also, yeah, I'm sorry, what was I saying? So disable notifications temporarily before going in. Mac users know you can option click the notifications doohickey in the upper right corner, whatever that button is called. Option click it. I should do that now. I forgot to do it before this call. And it grays back and it puts it to do not disturb mode. You can also click that icon and it brings up the notifications panel. You can swipe up. It doesn't always display, and click do not disturb. On an iPhone, iPad, swipe to show the control center and tap the little do not disturb half moon icon. And then just remember to undo not disturb yourself, redisturb yourself after the call. But this way it keeps your focus on the screen, especially if you're an active participant. If someone's looking at you while they're talking, you're in a small group or you're presenting, you're not doing. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Because we're prone to distractions. Something flashes up in the corner. So thank you to my wife Lynn for mentioning that. And there's now a page on that in the book. So all platforms, this covers all the Zoom platforms, how to disable notifications.
Yeah, and anybody that's done any Zooms has, especially for business, again, you've seen that happen. And it's something we all do, but it still is less than professional. And you're really trying to look good here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem: is we're all trying to put our best foot forward. We are all, most of us are still working at home, or we're maybe in an office by ourselves, depending. Some people are able to go back into an office, but they're often the only person in there in a completely empty space. And we're trying to, everyone knows we're not putting on a facade. We're not pretending we're in a broadcast facility. We're not pretending things are normal, but people still read cues. So anything you can do to show you're paying attention and people can see your expression, the better.
Today's edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac X. CleanMyMac X is an all-in-one file cleaning and optimizing tool for the Mac. There are others, but none are as trusted as CleanMyMac X. In one fell swoop, CleanMyMac X scans your system for outdated files with the System Junk feature, and also delivers information on your Mac storage space. That's 2 utilities right there, but that's not all. You're not going to wonder what you're doing because CleanMyMac X supports a simple interface, letting you know what you're doing and what you're going to do next, so there are no missteps or surprises. And CleanMyMac X keeps you updated with information on your Mac's CPU load, available RAM, free space, and more. If you want your Mac to run the best it can, you need to run CleanMyMac X. Find out everything that CleanMyMac X can do and download your copy at macpaw.com/podcasts, or find CleanMyMac X on the Apple App Store. That's macpaw.com/podcast, macpaw.com/podcast, to download your copy of CleanMyMac X. Do it now and get your Mac up to speed. Thanks to MacPaw for supporting Mac Voices.
So my next tip, I think this is number 6, is it's related to presenting yourself well, and it is, if you're going to be sharing your screen in a presentation, clear off everything from your screen that's not useful. Often, Zoom has a great ability to share just a window in an app, which is great. So you focus on that and nothing else is shown. But, there's been cases already where people have had pornography opened in a tab and they're sharing their browser window, and a professor got seemingly fired for doing that at a university in Florida. What one does in one's own time should be private, but when it appears in a business or academic call, it can get you into trouble. But it's also even things like you could have, as you know, Chuck, like tabs can be really distressing because they will show you part of a message sometimes if you have like a webmail open. So a tab in the background for a business call that says fire all employees, that might be a bad thing for anyone to see. And the memo might say, we're not firing all employees, but so I suggest opening a new browser window, opening in fact, you might worry about bookmarks pre-filling. So you might actually use a browser that you don't normally use. If you're a Safari user, install and use Chrome and test that it works the way you expect. But make sure that you're not showing people things that are private, personal, or proprietary, confidential, non-public, whatever, of all kinds. And that one can really get you into trouble. But you can also, it's kind of like the whiteboard. You go into an office and some companies forget that they have all their secrets on a whiteboard in a conference room, and you walk in and it has their business plan on it. And they're like, oh, and they start erasing, or they said, turn away, and it's the same kind of thing. You've got to make sure that you're not giving away the farm by accident.
Yeah, and I've done interviews here for MacVoices where somebody is in a conference room and they realize it halfway through, and we have to go back and start over.
Oh no! Right.
Because and of course to me it doesn't mean anything, but it's going to be memorialized here for their competitors and everyone else to see. So it's like, oh my God, I didn't realize. Yeah, good. Well, that's a really good one.
This is not a conspiracy theory, but I maintain that every piece of video, every piece of audio, every image on the internet that is publicly available will eventually have OCR or voice recognition applied to it, or even lip reading. So at some point in the future, and it might be 6 months or 5 years, it will all be transcribed and available in some fashion. So even if you have something in a whiteboard in your background, it's possible that future image or video analysis software will just Google will be like, we've indexed all the text in every image on YouTube. You're like, what? No, but it's a possibility. It's a possibility. Yeah. You can get primitive podcast transcripts. In fact, they get fed through AIs and so forth.
Yeah, I'm playing with that actually right now, and
it's good.
It is surprisingly good. I mean, okay, the punctuation is kind of wacky, and it's not going to be 100%, but for where we are right now, it is surprisingly good.
Yeah, if you're using Zoom and you're a paid subscriber, which starts it's $20 a month for the single host package, which gives you some extra powers, lets you crowd based recording of Zoom sessions and a few other little extras, including unlimited meetings and so forth. But one of the things, I believe it's at the one host level. I don't think you have to be at the pro business level, which is a package of 10 hosts or more. It lets you tie into Otter.ai, which is one of these AI-based pay-as-you-go transcription services. So if you're at that right tier, you can have your Zoom meeting and have the audio directly fed into the transcription. So the meeting is over, your recording is done, and a few minutes later you get a transcript that, as you say, it's not perfect, but it might be good enough to distribute for people to scan through or to search on keywords or even clean up and make a formal transcript from. There's an extra tip. I keep coming up with extra tips, Chuck. All right, here's my last one before we can have a more general conversation. I'll just like this. So you see behind me, this is a green screen, and behind the green screen is all the terror of this my basement. Now with Zoom, so we are using Skype, and I will show you in Skype, obviously, it has a background. They just improved this, actually, at least in the Mac client, where you can, let me find this section here, you can select either blur the background, and, oops, wait, did I do it? Oh, yeah, there we go. So it blurred it, but it's kind of picking up the mic, and you can see I've moved my hand. I can put a background image of the Hamilton Type Museum in Two Rivers, Wisconsin. I happen to have handy. Or you can add your own images. Now you see, again, it's not bad. You can see some of the blue behind my head. It's not perfect. It's not terrible. And if I had less distractions, it would work better. And the algorithm, I think the Skype algorithm works better without anything behind you. So it'll subtract like a normal. If I just do this, you can see, you can't even see, I can disappear myself because it'll hide me. So it's actually erasing the background behind the green screen. Now in Zoom, Zoom has two modes for virtual backgrounds. One is it'll subtract any kind of messy background you have, and the other, you can select a green screen color so it doesn't have to be green, and it will just remove that like you're in a professional studio. And it's amazing. And I got this partly because I do have a bad, the lighting is tricky, the basement is messy, it's where I work, I like it, but it's not in a studio condition. So I can do this, and I can put either a blank background behind me, or I can drop in something exciting like the Hamilton Museum behind me, and then That's a lot of fun. So that's what this is. So it was kind of hilarious. So it's like I can pull the curtain back and you can see, but it's low cost, just a green blanket. It's not even anything exciting like a professional, seamless, wrinkle-free screen, and it works quite well.
And I don't want to mess the tips up, but this is something that
That's it. That's my last tip.
Okay. All right. So this is something I've changed my opinion on, because at first I was not really into the backgrounds, and it's just like, okay, that seems not cheating. I mean, but it comes with a couple standard backgrounds, and that's fine. And what I've discovered, though, especially during this situation, as more people have had to get on Zoom and they're having time to play with it, that backgrounds have become almost a way of expressing oneself. A favorite place or where they would really rather be or they want to be. I know I was on one, and this was a business person who was like, he's the last person I would have thought would have been into doing this. And he had a background of a jail cell.
That's hilarious.
And it's like, it blew my mind, because these are people that, are not techies, and they're hard-bitten business people. And yet they're not only will they put the background up, but they'll tell you how much time they spent looking on the internet for exactly the right background. It's like, what happened here? It's
hilarious.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Oh yeah, there you go.
I just point out there's a lot of these backgrounds available too, and it's here's Finding Nemo behind me. People will spend a lot of time doing their own, and then there's also a zillion companies have released backgrounds, because especially companies I wouldn't expect it, like Disney. This is from an official Disney release, and BBC just put up you don't even have to be a BBC license TV license payer in the UK. You can download the background for Doctor Who and a bunch of famous BBC shows. They have all these empty set photos that they took just in planning the sets, just in normal photography. It went to the archives, scanned them beautifully, and so you can just put yourself into these environments. For me, again, because I'm working, and a lot of us are working in non-traditional places, and I'm not trying to necessarily hide that I work in a basement, but I'm telling you, I'm not hiding. I'm literally telling you, but it's also, I think it's distracting. And again, this green screen is a little much. If I'm using, depending on what I'm doing, I might put a background that looks like a very normal office, or could even be a cleaned up version of the space I'm in, which is hilarious. But people do that. They're like, here's my perfect office. It looks identical. Nobody knows that it's piled up with books and papers and kids' drawings right now. But I think it's part of normalization too, is people are bored of working at home, or they may feel, embarrassed, or just like maybe it's too personal. It's like, I don't really want my home in the background. So I do always I think the blur feature in Skype, and the blur feature in Zoom lets you blur your face a little bit. These things are nice as a way to kind of reduce what's happening in your environment to other people and feel like you're exerting a sense of control.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. And Zoom is the first one. I mean, it's been interesting to watch some of the competition come on and implement some of these features. But Zoom was the first one that made it pretty much just click here, and if your machine can handle it, and what the heck, click it. Why not? See what happens, because it doesn't hurt, and you can end up with some pretty darn good results. In fact, I think the keyer in Zoom is probably a little better than Skype.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Is they started doing it years ago, so they have more experience in their algorithm. The Zoom algorithm is eerie too, because my background is very chaotic and at all these different depths and variously lit, and yet Zoom, it'll make my head it doesn't get my hair perfect. I look a little bullet heady in Zoom when I use it without a green screen, but it really does. It's remarkable about figuring it out, and it's generally pretty good. Like if you hold your hands up, it sometimes starts to flicker and get weird. But otherwise, it's very solid. And this is the advantage. They've been working on the software since 2011. They've had a very specific focus. Excuse me. And I think despite security problems and a few other things, they really have maturity in very specific areas, as opposed to overall maturity that we might want from this product.
Yeah, and I'll just, and I don't want to steal any thunder from you or from the book, but
Oh,
I've created my own using just a graphics program, a 1920 by 1080 image, and put our company logo over on one side of it, and then I just slide myself to the other side,
that's
and you've
great.
got the branding right there. And now it's not, the bridge of the Enterprise or whatever. It is at least it may not be super professional, but it looks like you are representing whoever you're supposed to be representing.
Yeah, and I did a Zoom call. I was making screen captures for the book, so I did kind of hey, anybody who's available, I can use your likeness and name in this book that I'm doing. If you have a few minutes, and I got, I don't know, 20 something people, which was fun. And some people I didn't even know they were from Twitter. Some people who I barely knew or didn't even really followed me, and other people are old friends. And a couple people I went to college with, I haven't seen in person for 20 or 30 years, but we connect on Facebook or whatever. It was great. So it was kind of motley crew, and we're talking, and I was making screen captures. And at one point, I noticed someone, it seems like they're in a classroom. And I said, "Oh, are you?" I knew they were a teacher. And I said, "Oh, are you back in your, can you go into your classroom even though the students aren't there?" And he said, "No, I took a picture of the classroom and I use it as my background when I teach. So the students see a familiar environment." I was like, oh, my heart breaks. It was a very, very nice thing to do.
See, that's the kind of creativity that the technology allows. I mean, that's a great idea, and especially for kids, because now
Oh,
they
yeah.
feel like, okay, I mean, you're not going to fool them. They don't believe they're in school, but
Right.
there's that mindset that happens.
Hmm.
That's great.
Just a little bit in the background. It's the familiarity. It's not, it's also my teacher's house. I don't even want to believe my teacher lives someplace. They live at school, right?
Good point. Real good point. Real good point. Well, so let's get into the book a little bit,
Mhm.
because I feel obligated to ask this question.
Yeah.
First of all, you wrote, I think, the definitive article on the Zoom situation as it was now, as we record this, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe a little longer actually, with a lot of the security issues and all. And I'll have a link in the show notes to that article because it is a really, really great comprehensive article. But now we're this many weeks later. How do you feel about Zoom and its security and who should be using it and who shouldn't be using it?
I was very nervous while writing that article because I was planning to write this book. And I thought, wow, am I going to be able to feel confident to encourage people to use a piece of software that I don't know is secure enough? And the thing that is amazing to me is as I was writing that TidBITS article, literally we were trying to edit it. And as we were editing it, new disclosures were coming out. And I'd be like, oh, no, here's another one. They'd be like, oh, they fixed it. So what I found is that the company in the past has been much less responsive to security researchers and to bug reports, and they made a huge transition. They were faced with an impossible task. And it's one thing if you're, I think, a Google or a Microsoft, and it's like, hey, our usage is going up 10% or 10 times overnight or 50-fold overnight. They're like, great, we have 1 million servers. We'll just turn some knobs and we'll have some people work 18-hour shifts, and it's fine. We do this all the time. We launch something new and we go from 0 bits per second to 100 gigabits per second in 3 minutes, and we manage that, right? Zoom, even though it's managed a lot of data, so Zoom is it's a privately held company. They have finite resources, and they were growing pretty fast over the years, but they're not I mean, they may be valued at many billions of dollars now, but they're not a company with massive amounts of endless resources the way a Google is. Google can fire up 1 million servers if it needs to. So they had to manage some 20 or 30-fold growth in a matter of weeks. And organically, like Zoom didn't say like, hey, everyone should use it. It was like everyone said, Zoom is the tool. We're all getting on it. It's the easiest thing. It just happened. And they managed that very well. Zoom had incredible uptime. The video quality remained good. Their best attribute, I think, is being able to have lots of simultaneous video sessions that really look good on a screen. And I remember a few years ago doing a session for a company I was contracting for, and there were 50 or 60 people. I was like, this is impossible. How do you get 50 or 60 video feeds on one screen and it's working? But it is. All right, well, that's fascinating. And now I did one the other day and there were 15 people. Everyone looked in HD. I was just in one earlier today that had 90 something people. It's split into 4 screens on my Mac. And so this is all, I mean, this is all me not trying to make an excuse for them, but say like they focused on what I think they thought was important. And I don't think they'd focus as much on the kind of everything no holds barred nature of the internet. And when they started getting criticized, they seemed very defensive, like, well, we're doing a really good job, so whatever, this isn't important. And then very quickly, I would say, as soon as stuff started to come out in early March, they really started to change their tone. They started to apologize. They started to take responsibility. They quickly set out a roadmap. And then every time a new bug came out or a new exploit, within sometimes a few hours, typically no more than 2 days, they had it solved. And if it was a server-side thing, they would turn it off immediately. Then they would fix it. Then they would roll it back out. And I was actually kind of impressed by the speed at which they did that. And they got a lot of code to go through. They got a lot of issues. They have a lot of technical debt. But at the same time, if you look at many of the major security experts in the field, a lot of people who've been working in encryption and cryptography and privacy for decades, many of them have been very supportive of Zoom because Zoom has been so open about its failings and about its path to improve things, and it's admitted it's wrong. Basically, yeah, we chose the wrong encryption method. Yeah, we did that thing and we shouldn't have. It was a mistake, and we are not going to do it again. And here's how you know and can check. So that reassured me, even while I was reading an article with like the 72 things Zoom did that was a problem, and they have continued. Gosh, I think I wrote the article a month ago now. It seems, time is an illusion right now. And anyway, it seems like they've continued on that path, and they're starting on May 9th, they rolled out a bunch of changes, including mandatory passwords on free and basic accounts for all meetings, where I think they'd push towards it. Now it's mandatory. May 30th, they are going to force everyone to upgrade to Zoom 5.0 clients, which add additional security features and are all up to date in all the different ways. So my reaction is, if they'd continue to be, I wouldn't have written this book, basically, if they continued to be resistant and slow. And instead, they threw everything on it. They said, we're freezing every other feature except security for 90 days as of late March. And we're going to hire a bunch of people and develop an advisory board of people to recommend it. And we're going to listen to them, and we're going to do it. So far, so good. And I'll point out, too, the first chunk of the book, like it's a good, 10 pages or so. I dig into everything they did that was sloppy or incorrect, and then how they rectified it, plus things you should be concerned about going forward, and even a section on like, how can you trust Zoom now? Here's how you could look at it. So people might buy the book and read that section and say, I'm not comfortable with Zoom right now. I'm not going to use it, which is a funny thing to do after buying a book about how to use the software. We have a generous returns policy, I will point out, at Take Control. But I really wanted to make sure people weren't, if they hadn't heard about this, that they could read all about it and understand what had happened and what risks remain. So that's my long answer, but I think the company's moving in the right direction, and they just have to continue to prove that they're moving in that way.
That wraps up the first part of our discussion with Glenn Fleishman about his new Take Control book, Take Control of Zoom. In the second part, Glenn talks a lot more about all the feature sets of Zoom, why Zoom is so approachable and what makes it so good, the recording capabilities, and a whole lot more. So I hope you'll join us then for the next edition of MacVoices. As always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.